The expedition led by archaeologist Valentina King arrived in the virtual valley beneath a sky laden with gray clouds. Structures emerged from the ground like broken teeth. All that remained of a civilization vanished millennia ago, leaving no trace. Valentina adjusted the headlamp on her helmet. Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from anticipation. Beside her, Hector, a linguist specializing in ancient scripts, scratched his unruly beard as he examined the grooves in the walls. "This isn't a temple," he murmured. "It's an archive." Jara, the engineer of the group, rolled her eyes. "An archive of what? Carved stone doesn't talk." Valentina ignored the provocation. She knew Hector was right. The geometric designs repeated in spirals, like codes. Later, as the sun set, Mordecai, the biologist, found something buried beneath a fractured slab. A dark, cold metal object, with markings that seemed to pulse under the artificial light. "This isn't human," he said, his voice deeper than intended. That night, as they set up camp, Jara swore she heard whispers coming from the ruins. No one believed her until the wind suddenly stopped and a bluish light began to seep through the cracks in the stones. On the second day, a storm isolated the valley. The rain washed away trails and damaged equipment. Valentina insisted they continue, even as Hector noticed the inscription's shifting position when no one was looking. "They're watching us," he said, rubbing his red eyes from exhaustion. Jara, ever pragmatic, suggested abandoning the artifact, but Mordecai argued it could hold the key to understanding that society's collapse. That's when Valentina realized the wall drawings weren't just symbols, but maps of unknown constellations. As she traced the lines with her finger, part of the ground collapsed, revealing an underground chamber. Inside, carved from crystal, was a faceless humanoid figure, its hands outstretched, holding a globe that reflected the dark object. "This isn't a monument," Valentina whispered. "It's a warning." Before they could retreat, the artifact began to hum deeply. Jara screamed as shadows started moving on the walls, not as silhouettes, but as if they were alive. Mordecai grabbed his field notebook, frantically writing, while Hector tried to decipher the new inscriptions that appeared. "Time," he gasped. "They're talking about time." By the third morning, the artifact had vanished. In its place was a hole in the ground, as if the earth had swallowed the metal. Valentina awoke with sand in her hair, though there was no wind. Hector sat by the extinguished campfire, muttering phrases in a language no one knew. Jara found footprints around the camp, footprints that belonged to no known animal. Mordecai, pale, confessed to seeing the crystal globe move during the night. "It showed things," he said, avoiding Valentina's gaze. When they tried to leave the valley, the trails led them back to the ruins. It was then they realized the artifact wasn't lost, but guiding them. On the walls of the underground chamber, new images appeared: ruined cities, luminous creatures, and a solitary figure holding the globe with a face identical to Valentina's. Hector, his voice trembling, translated the final inscription: "Those who seek knowledge must first become empty." Before they could understand, the ground trembled and the sky darkened. This time, it wasn't a storm. It was something greater, something that watched, waited, and finally responded. The storm raged like a living beast, tearing stones from the walls and turning the earth into mud. Valentina held the artifact to her chest, its surface now warm despite the frigid air. Mordecai rubbed his temples, muttering about unstable isotopes and decay patterns that made no sense. "This metal isn't on the periodic table," he said, his voice muffled by the wind. Hector, soaked and shivering, pointed to a crack in the underground chamber wall. The markings had rearranged themselves, forming a spiral that seemed to spin even when stared at. "It's not a warning," Valentina corrected. "It's an invitation." Jara, busy trying to repair the damaged radio, muttered something about collective hallucinations. Then the artifact emitted a distinct click, and the crystal globe in the chamber illuminated, projecting holograms of slender creatures with elongated limbs and eyes like black holes. Mordecai recoiled, stumbling over exposed roots. "They aren't from here," he whispered. "Nor from our time." The rain stopped abruptly at dawn on the third day, leaving a silence so dense that even breathing seemed loud. Valentina ordered them back to the chamber, but the path was blocked by a rock formation that wasn't there before. Hector, his fingers bleeding from digging, noticed that the wall markings now told a linear story. The civilization had built machines to control time, but something had escaped their control. "They didn't die," he said, his voice failing. "They dispersed." Jara, her face pale, showed Valentina a photo taken moments before. In the artifact's reflection, 3 extra figures were visible in their group. Mordecai, trying to maintain composure, collected samples of lichen growing on the stones. Under the portable microscope, their cells flickered in sync with the artifact's designs. "It's as if they're communicating," he admitted. As night fell, the artifact began to vibrate, pulling Valentina into the darkness. She didn't resist. In the heart of the ruins, where the air smelled of ozone and burnt stone, Valentina found a pool of silvery liquid. Its surface reflected not the valley, but a city in motion, its towers twisting like roots. The artifact slipped from her hands and sank into the liquid, creating ripples that transformed into faces. Hector and Jara reached her, gasping, but Mordecai remained behind, mesmerized by a light only he could see. "You need to see this," he cried, his voice echoing from nowhere. As Valentina approached the pool, one of the reflected figures extended a hand, its mouth forming words in a language she somehow understood. "The key isn't for opening, but for closing." Jara grabbed her arm, but it was too late. The ground vanished, and they fell into a darkness that wasn't empty, but full of whispers and memories that didn't belong to them. The darkness wasn't empty. It was an ocean of voices, each telling a different story of what had happened there. Valentina saw floating cities crumble in slow motion, creatures of light turn into shadows, and a silent war waged between thinking machines and humans who no longer understood anything. Mordecai was beside her, but his eyes shone like those of the figures in the hologram. "They used us as messengers," he said, extending a hand to touch a wall that wasn't there. Jara screamed as Hector vanished, replaced by a translucent figure repeating his movements, like a delayed echo. The dark artifact floated above the silvery pool, now larger. Its surface displayed scenes of a future that could be avoided or accelerated. Valentina then understood. The civilization hadn't been destroyed, only fragmented. They had scattered through time, leaving pieces of themselves in different eras to survive. The artifact was a seed, not a key, and they were feeding it with their memories. Jara tried to destroy it with a stone, but her hand passed through the metal, as if it were smoke. "There's no point in resisting," said a voice that sounded like Mordecai's, but somehow wasn't. "You're already inside." Hector, or what remained of him, smiled sadly. "They gave us a choice: carry the weight of knowledge or forget." As the silvery light enveloped them, Valentina saw her own face in the monument. It wasn't a coincidence. She had been drawn there, as had the others, because their minds were compatible with the machine. The artifact pulsed, offering 2 visions. One back to the camp, with the valley untouched and the mystery buried. The other of a transformed world, where time was malleable and humanity rebuilt. Jara grabbed her arm, begging to choose the first option. Mordecai, however, reached out for the second, his eyes filled with tears and fascination. Hector said nothing, only pointed to the final inscription on the walls, now clear: "The price of emptiness is losing who we are." The artifact didn't wait for an answer. It split into 3 fragments, each flying towards a member of the group. Valentina felt her mind expand, seeing all possibilities at once, and then nothing. She awoke in the valley, beneath a clear sky, the radio working, and no sign of the ruins. Jara wept silently, embracing a blank journal. Mordecai laughed, holding a common stone as if it were the greatest treasure. Hector was on his knees, writing frantically, "They are everywhere. We are them." Valentina touched her own neck, where a fresh scar formed the pattern of the inscriptions. She knew something had changed, but not what. And in the silence that followed, she couldn't tell if they had saved the world or merely delayed its end.